Okay, welcome everyone to episode number 24 of the USA Hockey Officiating Zoomcast. Very pleased to have you tonight. Hopefully everyone had a safe and enjoyable holiday weekend, and in most cases, I hope you're ready to get back out on the ice and get back at it. I know that there's some areas of the country that may have slowed down a little bit, but most important thing is hopefully everyone's safe, and we appreciate your continued passion for the game and joining us on a weekly basis with these Zoomcasts. My name is Matt Leaf. I'm the director of the Officiating Education Program for USA Hockey, and I am your moderator for tonight. I'm very pleased to be joined by a gentleman by the name of Bruce Urban. Bruce is a longtime USA Hockey director, originally from the Pacific District, and currently a director at large. That also is a director representative to our executive committee right now. He's a longtime member of the USA Hockey Playing Rules Committee, and his relevance tonight, not to mention the decades of experience on the ice hockey officiating or administrative side, is he's also the disciplinary chairman for the Arizona Amateur Hockey Association. Joining Bruce is Jim Dewhirst, who is in his 20th year as the district referee in chief for the Southeastern District, and is still a very active on-ice official with 30 plus, maybe even 40 plus years of experience on the ice, and we appreciate both Jim and Bruce joining us tonight. So welcome, and we look forward to providing you hopefully some valuable information. Just a quick reminder, if you do have questions as the evening pops up, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there should be a Q&A section where you can type in any type of question. We will try to monitor those throughout the course of the evening or the session. And anything that we can answer, we'll certainly take our best shot at it. For those that have been involved in the past, we want to start out with our weekly poll to gather some information and get a little bit of a feel for what our audience is dealing with relative to this topic. So I'm going to take this moment here to launch the polling. There are 4 questions. If you could please take your time, go ahead, read the question, submit your answer. And then when you get down to the end of the 4th question, you'll have an option to be able to submit. We'll give you a minute or two to go through the poll questions, and we'll share the results real quickly, and then we'll get going with the rest of tonight's program. Okay, looks like we're pretty much got everyone here, so I'm going to end the polling, and we shall share the results. Okay, question number 1. Have you used the USA Hockey game reporting system within the last 12 months? A little over 50% said yes, and a little under 50% said no. So fortunately, I guess for the 48%, it's a good thing that you haven't had to assess that type of a penalty, and hopefully it stays that way, and it's something that USA Hockey is going to continue to strive for in terms of creating that safe environment. How would you rate your overall experience using the USA Hockey game reporting system? Pretty much spread over the map here. Looks like 40% have never had to use it. Once again, congratulations. I guess that's a good thing, although maybe at some point down the road here, it's probably gonna get you at some point. And it looks like the rest of the 60% either excellent, good, or satisfactory. So appreciate that feedback, and it is something that we continue to strive to improve on. Every year we try to make more updates and make it a little bit more user friendly. Understanding though that part of that purpose of that program is also to assist our volunteer administrators and our disciplinary people to help make their jobs a little bit easier as well. So it's not just something that is exclusive to the officiating program. Excuse me. How important is that players and coaches with unacceptable behavior are held accountable with additional discipline? Not a surprise here. 96% feel very strongly that that accountability is an important part of correcting unacceptable behavior, and it's something that we'll continue to strive to do. And finally, does it make sense for USA Hockey to establish minimum suspension standards i.e. for kicking a 3-game minimum for match penalties in lieu of conducting a hearing for every match penalty. 70% seem to think that did make sense. 22% were not in favor, and a couple of people just didn't have an opinion. So again, thank you very much for that feedback. It is something that is important to us and allows us each week to gather information from our audience and from our members, and hopefully help us drive programming and adjustments and changes down the road to make things a little bit better. So with that being said, I'm going to go into a real quick presentation here and get started with some questions for the panelists. And we'll get started with the primary program tonight. Okay, so first thing, I'm just going to share some data with you tonight, just to give you a little bit of a historical perspective of the game reporting system and what some trends have been related to those reports. As you can see here, here is basically a 7-year history of the number of reports that have been filed. Obviously, there's been a slight increase each season, with last season the shortened season, with most of hockey being shut down in the end of February, early March. That probably contributes to the fact that the total numbers were down a little bit. But I did want to give you that perspective in terms of what it looks like historically. And with that, I'm going to start out the first question for Bruce here. You know, you've worked with the game reporting system since day one in your role as the disciplinary chair. Has it made your job easier as a volunteer? And does some of this data, does it help you understand trends and maybe help your disciplinary committee make some decisions moving forward to make the game a little bit safer?
Yeah, no question, Matt. This has been a huge help for us in the disciplinary world. And I was involved before the reporting system that we have now. And back then, and I think Jimmy can attest to this too, we'd get the reports done on the back of the score sheet, and they were sometimes chicken scratched, and you couldn't really read what was there, and you had to track down the referee and so on and so forth. But now with the reporting system, you have that. I have it the same day that the official writes it up and submits it. And if I have any questions, I can, their email addresses are there. I can contact them and get more information. Plus the fact that I have exactly what was done. There's a better detailed area to expound on what the penalty actually was. And that's been very helpful for our committee, who looks at that and uses that a lot to make some determinations. Of course, the hearing is the most important part, but the game reporting system by far is the best thing that I think I've seen happen to this area in a long, long time.
Yeah, I guess it's probably safe to say too, Bruce, that the old days of a team going out of state and doing something really stupid and hoping that information doesn't get back to you are long gone.
Yeah, there's no question about it. They know we have it in hand, and when they come back from that road trip, they're already questioning me, or even before they get home, they're emailing me and asking questions about what's going to take place. So it's been a huge help in that respect.
Very good. Very good. Moving on to the next slide here. Again, given a little bit of a historical perspective, and this is a trend, I got a couple of slides that are going to apply to this. But you'll see that this last season, even though we had a smaller number of total reports because of the season being cut short, the percentage of those reports that have been submitted over the course of the last 4 seasons, specifically related to coaches, and let's face it, those are going to be more along the lines of abusive officials, seems to be trending up a little bit. And just to take that one step further, You look at the match penalties is certainly gone up a little bit, okay, and especially last season. And we'll maybe touch on that in a second, but that could certainly be related to the Declaration of Player Safety and some of the initiatives that we implemented related to the unacceptable behavior and those types of things. But I wanted to show the trend of the overall abuse or percentage of reports dealing with abuse of officials, specifically under Rule 601, also trended up for this last season. So with that being said, Jim, that season is basically the highest percentage we've had since we started collecting that data of the abuse of officials penalties from both coaches and players, so to speak. I guess, and that really led to an updated zero tolerance policy, which I believe everyone should be aware of. It's something that we've covered pretty extensively through these Zoom casts and through our educational materials. But with that being said, other than the zero tolerance and the proper enforcement, what are some other things that officials and leaders can do to hopefully reverse this trend and get it going in the right direction again?
Well, first of all, I think that a lot of things are being done, and we for USA Hockey are really trying to stress that we got to have better communication with coaches on the ice. A lot of times, these circumstances that occur, there was always a decision point, someplace where maybe it could have been escalated downwards or de-escalated as opposed to be escalation. And so I think that officials are learning better how to deal with coach that gets a little crazy, not to be in their face, not to continue to sort of escalate the situation, but to skate away, give appropriate penalties, and then stay away from the coach. I also think then the coaches training, they're working a lot harder toward getting coaches to understand that their job is to coach and not to scream at officials. There is a time and a place to ask officials questions and learning how to do that. Same thing with officials. We have to learn how to be able to answer coaches' questions and not with just the, hand in the face, we don't talk to you, that sort of thing.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And just again, I want to be able to full transparency here. I'm going to suggest that part of the reason why we do have that increase in the percentage of match penalties is keep in mind the president's directive as it relates to hateful and discriminatory language jumped up from a game misconduct to a match penalty mid-season last season in October of 2019. So that contributed to about 250 match penalties that normally would have been a game misconduct. So I think that's probably going to account for that increase in percentage there. So I don't want to give anyone the impression that the game has gotten any more dangerous from that perspective, but it certainly maybe has gotten a little bit more stupid. Moving on to the next slide here. And again, this is some interesting things, and it's certainly going to be too early to tell for sure what the long-term trend is going to be. And unfortunately, to a certain extent, this season isn't going to necessarily be an accurate reflection of a full season. But the total percentage of reports that are dealing with those penalties that are under Rule 411, the aggressive infractions, are actually down 3%. But at the same time, the percentage of reports for the big four, boarding, charging, checking from behind, and head contact, are actually up a percentage and a half, somewhere in that range. So I think, I guess my question for you, Bruce, has been involved in this game for a long time. Is this an indication that we may be seeing some progress as it relates to minimizing or eliminating aggressive behavior as a result of 411, the progressive suspension, and the enforcement of the big four? Is that possibly a direct result of the Declaration of Player Safety and really emphasizing those four areas as it relates to unacceptable behavior?
Well, I think certainly I hope that is the case, especially the progressive suspension rule 411. Now that we've had this rule in place for a number of years, I think it's getting out there. The players and the coaches are more aware of that now, and I think they keep track of it a little bit better and don't want to have that happen to their player where they're out for 2, 3, 4 games because of an infraction that normally would have only been 1 game. So I think that's helped a whole lot. The Declaration of Player Safety certainly is something that I think more people are becoming aware of. And as we go through the years, I think we're going to just have to emphasize that more and more each and every year. You're right, this year is an anomaly, but we haven't seen repeat offenders very often in Arizona. So I think the word is getting out there.
And Matt, if I could just add in,
Please.
I really think that what we're seeing also is a better identification of what happens on the ice by officials.
Yes.
And calling the proper penalty instead of, well, yeah, he checked him from behind, but I'm just going to call him boring. So I think that we've done a better job in education to the officials to get them to call the correct penalties.
Yeah. No, I think that that's an excellent point. And as you're well aware, the Declaration made a very strong concerted effort to improve some of the language and the terminology and to make things a little bit more clear as to what was deemed to be acceptable or unacceptable. And hopefully that's part of that education process. Now, the fascinating thing is, and I don't want to, I guess I'm going to tease a potential upcoming episode, probably after the first of the year sometime. But as we go into reviewing some of the rule change proposals and those types of things, I think you're going to see some very interesting information that's going to even make things even that much easier for officials to be able to distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable, and where exactly that line may be between a major penalty and a match penalty, and those types of things. So stay tuned for that one. We've had some great discussions with the Plain Rules Committee thus far, and it will be something that we'll definitely be touching on probably sometime in January. Moving on to the next slide. Gonna be honest here, Jim. You might darn well be the best 14 and under referee I've ever worked with or ever seen in my life. You have any explanation as to why the 14U seems to be our hot age group here for reports?
Well, thank goodness you didn't ask about the 12 and under, because I can't do those. They're tough. This is a bit surprising, actually. I think, it's my opinion that probably what's happening here is 2 things. First of all, at the upper age groups, they're used to the checking. They've been sort of through this player safety stuff for several years now, and they're doing a better job. I think coaches are probably doing a better job with their players and so forth. The 14U, the thing I can think of is that this is that first year of checking, and they're still learning how to do it. And some programs are better than others at kind of teaching it when you start in your 12U times. But you're out there for the first time, and just that, I don't quite know when to hold up. I don't quite know, when I should be doing my, when somebody's in the boards and how I need to approach them. And so I think it's a bit of a learning process for them. That's about the only thing I can really think of.
No, I think that's an excellent point. The only other thing I'm going to offer up there is that there's more players playing at that level. Certainly considerably more so. I mean, there's only roughly about 115, 125, 15 only teams in the country. So even if you want to break that down by a percentage basis, they may be actually the bad guys there, so to speak. And I think you bring up some excellent points in terms of still learning the game, especially the physicality part or the physical portion of that game. But I'll also add that there's probably, on a percentage basis, I don't have the total number of players, but my guess is that there's probably quite a few more players playing at the 14 level, even at recreational, than there is at either the 16s or 18s. But It's a trend I think we want to continue to monitor. Obviously, it comes into play when we have discussions as it relates to the playing rule changes and specific changes or specific concepts for various ages, and it's something that we'll certainly continue to monitor. Final slide real quick. I just wanted to give everyone again an overview. This is for the 2019-20 season, and just looking at where those game reports for the aggressive infractions that appear under 411, where they're coming from, and head contact. I would say it's a good thing that we are enforcing that rule. It is a terrible thing that it is still happening to the level of occurrence that requires 1,200 game reports to be submitted each season. Same thing with check from behind. It's a good thing that we're enforcing and we're assessing the penalty. It's a terrible thing that just under 1,200 occurrences that require a major or match penalty occur each season. And obviously, we've made a concerted effort in the last 7 to 10 years here with boarding and charging. I think boarding, everyone is getting a much better understanding of, and enforcement has been very good along those lines. Whereas charging is a little bit more difficult, trying to determine distance traveled, accelerating through the check. And the reality is, if I've charged someone and that person is along the boards, the chances are I'm probably getting the boarding penalty. So a lot of those may be twofold, so to speak, where you had an option of either boarding, charging, or checking from behind in each one of those instances. So one more quick question on this side for Bruce. In your role as the disciplinary chair, what are some of the key things you're looking for in a game report? What has to be included that's going to help your committee make that fair and reasonable decision? And I guess the other thing is what are some of the common mistakes that officials make that you see on a regular basis?
Well, I think I'll go with the mistakes first, and I don't know that they're mistakes or just not thinking really hard enough. Is the time? They don't always put the elapsed time. They might put the time that's on the clock. Some will put the actual elapsed time. And the only reason that makes a difference for myself is that when I go to the video and I'm trying to search the game and find out where the infraction happened, it sometimes takes me a bit longer than it normally would. That's a minor detail, but something that I would ask all referees that they think about that and they do the elapsed time. The other item that we really look at very closely is the description. There's a lot of room to write there. You could write, an essay on there if you really wanted to, and some do, some don't. Some write 2 lines, and that doesn't cut it for us. The more detail they put in there, the better it is for us. They need to be explicit in the language. If it was something to do with language, discriminatory in any way, use the exact words, because that's what we're looking for. We want to confront the person in the hearing with those words. If we know the exact words, a lot of times the player or the coach have a hard time disputing that. So it's really important to get as detailed as you possibly can before leading up to the incident itself, and then what maybe took place after the incident. Again, some referees are really good at this. Some are just learning and they're getting better. If I know it's a new referee, I'll contact them and ask them to explain it a little bit more in detail, and they'll come back with something. But that's the 2 primary areas that I'm looking at.
Okay, good stuff. Jim, kind of sort of the same question. What are you teaching or what are you looking for on the referee and chief instruction side that you're telling the officials are the key things?
What we're telling our officials are just a couple of basic things. Number 1 is be timely in completing your report. It doesn't do any good if you have a game on Saturday and it's the following Thursday night when you're finally doing the report. The disciplined people need to know about this right away. So 1 is timeliness. The second thing is just the accuracy of the basic information that's in the report, where it occurred, when it occurred, the time, as Bruce talked about. teams, players, anything else that you can add, but just make sure you do it accurately. And finally, in the narrative, how important it is to write down the key facts that happened. All right, we don't need a War and Peace novel on, it was a cloudy day and, the sun was shining brightly, all those things like that. We need to know what exactly happened. And it also doesn't need to be the 2-sentence model that Bruce talked about. It really needs to cover all the facts so that somebody who was not there can read it and can see it happen.
So, Jim, you've been down this road in terms of filing a report. Let's say that you were to do a typical report. You do a good job of paying attention to details. You give the explanation that you need to give. What's your time commitment there?
Obviously, it depends on the situation that occurs, but literally a game report can be completed in 10 minutes. So it doesn't have to be a long time commitment. It's probably, longer to actually get in and find where you get Wi-Fi and are able to get on your team report or your game report. But, again, it's doing it timely. You get home from a game, you've got a game report to do, get it done. Don't wait till that night or the next day because things tend to get fuzzy in your mind sometimes. So it's just best to do it as soon as you can.
That's an excellent advice. And I think that the other key here too is for the officials to understand it is part of your responsibility.
Absolutely.
If you go out and work the game and you did your 60 minutes, your 75 minutes, whatever it is, and you assess the penalty or had some sort of an incident that requires a game report, your job is not done. Okay. And I know many of you are being, quite frankly, you're being compensated. Your job is not done until that game report is submitted properly. So whether we like it or not, and unfortunately, we hear the stories or the war stories about, well, I didn't want to assess that penalty because then I have to file a game report. Hopefully those dinosaurs and those officials are going to be long gone, and we can extricate them from the game. But the bottom line is we have a responsibility to be a partner with our volunteers like Bruce. We've already identified the fact how important it is to us to hold those who are unacceptable actions accountable. Well, we play a role, and it really is a partnership with our disciplinary people and our volunteers like Bruce to make sure that they have the information that they need to make a practical decision. So going to shift gears just a little bit here. Bruce, you also, as your disciplinary chair, we focused on the game reports. We focused on the penalties that are actually assessed. You also have some responsibility under Rule 410 Supplementary Discipline to take a look at other incidents that may occur that maybe weren't penalized for whatever reason. Maybe the official missed it, but a player ended up getting injured, whatever it may be. How do those reviews come about, and what process do you follow in order to decide whether something does need review under supplementary discipline?
Well, as we all know, 410 can be a little bit tricky, and you need to be careful when you're going down that road. And quite often, I shouldn't say quite often, but occasionally a coach and even a parent will send me a video clip of what they think is a penalty. Sometimes it may be, sometimes it's not. I'll take a look at that, look at it closely. If I have questions about it, I may try and find out who the officials were and contact them and talk to them. And I'll also try to look into more video there to see what may have taken place. I'll also share that with one of my committee members, and together we'll come to a decision on whether we should have a hearing on it or not. And, again, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we'll just write it off and explain to the person, no, it really wasn't a penalty. This is really what occurred, what happened, but thanks for sending that forward. And we'll take a look at that down the line, so to speak. But when I do have a 410, and I think I've used it twice over the last couple of years, I don't necessarily suspend the player immediately or the coach, because it's a questionable call, so to speak. So we'll set up a hearing, bring them in, and then make a decision from there. And if there's a suspension that is warranted, then it's handed out and they're suspended from that point forward. So we do it from time to time, and we're very, very careful about it, because we don't want to get into the habit of using it, and also getting the coaches and the parents out there thinking that we're using that all the time now to save their child out there from getting hurt, or to get an eye for an eye, in a manner of speaking.
Very good. That's some great information. And going to touch on a couple of questions coming from the audience here real quick. The first one I just want to touch on, coming from a longtime participant in the Zoomcast, a player from Canada. And the question is, does that column then self-populate? The answer to that is no. Obviously, we're not going to have the registration number and the registration information for a player or a coach from Canada. However, if you do enter in Canada as the affiliate for that particular team, so you enter in instead of Arizona or New York State Amateur Hockey Association, you enter in to the Toronto Marlboros from Hockey Canada. When you get to that player, you can enter in that player's name. It's not going to require the registration field, because that's not something that we do have. But that information, and this is kind of sort of this has been an interesting thing too, because over the years we've had a lot of teams come down from Canada and thinking that they get a free pass. That report, when the official submits that report for a Canadian player or a coach, that automatically gets sent to my counterpart up in Hockey Canada. So the chances are that report is beating that team back to Canada. And I know that he gets a kick out of some of them, because he'll funnel it down to their local body. And it's like, they'll well, what? We didn't know about this, and try to plead ignorance. But the system is already worked and actually improved our relationship with Canada a little bit. I guess, Bruce, I want to get back to, what role does video play? How much with Live Barn, with Hockey TV, with parents' iPads and everything else that's out there, do you use video at all in the disciplinary process? And if you do, what are your parameters? What are some of the restrictions?
We do use video a lot. All the rinks here in the Phoenix area have Live Barn, so we have access to all the games normally. If something happens, a lot of the rinks have their own security cameras that they can bring up a feed and send it to me as well. They're pretty cooperative there. But we use video a lot. It really helps, because we can slow it down, play it back, 25 times if we have to take a good hard look at it. And I share those videos with all the committee members, so they have time to look at it beforehand. So we do use that. If a parent sends a video, we don't necessarily look at that. I may take a glance at it, and if I think it's helpful, I'll use it. But primarily, we're using the Live Barn video feed for the majority of our hearings. And it's surprising that some of the players, we'll ask them, "Have you seen a video of this?" And they're contesting what they did, and we'll play the video for them, and they go, "Oh, you're right, I did that." So it takes a lot of heat off of the committee quite often, and puts it back onto the player or the coach.
What about you, Jim? What kind of videos do you get sent as a district referee in chief?
Well, the good news is it's not as many as it used to be. I still am sent videos. And what we first of all encourage across the Southeastern District is that especially if it's parents, if they have complaints about an official, they need to take it up through their club to their local supervisors. All those clubs that are playing have relationships with the people that are scheduling the referees, and that's where it really needs to go. But I still do get some, and the staff in the Southeast do get some. A lot of times we'll look at them and try to ascertain what really happened out here. And one of the reasons that we do it is because I'm interested in seeing, and thank goodness it doesn't happen a lot, but there are things that officials just totally miss. And so I want to turn these into teaching opportunities. So either a state supervisor, usually the state supervisor, will actually get a hold of officials and just say, hey, we've got a complaint about this, and we've looked at a video. Here it is. You can look at it, and let's talk about what happened, and why the calls were made the way they were. Where were you? What did you see? And again, it's for us, it's a teaching opportunity that I want to make sure, because once you make a mistake as an official, hopefully you'll never make that mistake again. But it is something that you need to learn.
And what role do you and your supervisors in the Southeastern District play in the disciplinary process? Are you involved, or your supervisors in hearings at all? Where do they fit into the grand scheme?
Well, generally, and of course now it's all online, but generally across the district there are very few in-person hearings anymore. It's usually done online with calls and so forth. And our involvement is usually at the request of the discipline committee. We don't serve on any discipline committees. If they ask us for rule interpretations or casebook, analysis, whatever, that's what we provide. But it's Bruce's groups that do the actual determinations on what happens.
Okay, excellent. A couple questions from the audience real quick. Question is whether there's any thought of moving the report. Drilling into the profile is kind of sort of cumbersome and indirect. Couple things to that is probably not, and there's two reasons. Is first and foremost, we really are trying to establish, and although we still have some work to do to make everything a little bit more user friendly, we are trying to establish a one user login where you can log in once into your profile and access everything that you need. From testing to status to seminar attendance, the game reporting system, hopefully the evaluation system and everything else from that one user login. And to be able to protect not only our officials who are under the age of 18, we do need to have a login. We do need to have that protection. Not to mention, we also don't want parents thinking that, hey, I can file an incident report on Johnny's game and he just got tripped and god dang it, the referee didn't call a penalty, so I'm going to file a report. And then the third reason is really we want you to be able to manage and go back and by having it go through that profile, you'll notice once you file a report, that report stays with you. And if you need to save it and then come back to it later to finish it up to get some information, you can do that. You don't have to do it all at one time. If a week later the supervisor says, hey, I lost the report, can you send it to me again? You can log back in and do those types of things. So bottom line is we're pretty comfortable where they are right now and probably don't see any significant change there. Second question regarding coaches' responsibilities. This is a common one. What's USA Hockey doing to bolster, enhance the coaching training? I'm going to be brutally honest here. The reality is I know each and every day the coaching program is working just as hard as us to make their coaches better. And one of the things that we've really done, and one of the advantages of the virtual formats that we both had to transition to this season, is we are using a lot more video in terms of showing coaches what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. And it's the same video that we're using on the officiating side of things. And it's not going to get to that point where we're just going to say, hey, in order to coach, you have to take a rules exam. That's not what the coaching education program is about. The coaching education program is about teaching coaches how to go out and teach players skill and to create a positive environment for them. And yes, they have an obligation to learn the rules and know the rules. And we're doing some things along those lines through the education and through the declaration to improve those skills and those qualities. But the old adage that, well, let's just give the coaches a rules test doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So hopefully that answers that question. Bruce, next one for you. There's been some very preliminary discussion in regards to, we touched on it in the poll question, but a potential establishing a minimum discipline and standardizing the discipline for match penalties. Is this a strong possibility, and is this something that that you feel is maybe beneficial in terms of standardizing the penalties that are assessed, and then also improving transparency a little bit, and maybe even reducing some of the workload on the volunteers?
Well, first of all, I think it'll certainly reduce some of the workload on the volunteers. Here when we're in the height of the season, and again, this is not a normal season, but when we're in the height of a normal season, we meet twice a month, and we're probably seeing 3, 4, sometimes on the odd week, we'll see 5 hearings at a time. So this would cut down a lot, because some of these hearings or some of the penalties that we're seeing are redundant, and helmet being taken off in a scrum, those types of things, and usually it's I don't want to say it's a just a whitewash, in the sense that we just issue an automatic 3 games. We'll talk about it, we'll discuss it, we'll try to educate the player some, but some of those, if that's what it is, then there's sometimes no real reason to see that player. Now, I did say a little bit about the education. That's what would happen if we had that. It would take out the education a bit on the player, but it's something that me as the disciplinary chair can always write an email to the player, send him some information on that education, and let him know what he should be looking to do the next time out in that situation. But I would like to see us come to something where we could just take some of these penalties, and here's what the infraction is. We can always look at it. If we feel that it's really an egregious penalty, then I think that we should have the ability to hold a hearing and have the suspension that is warranted for whatever the infraction might be. But overall, I would like to see us at least get it started and go down the road on that.
Great, very good information. And I guess another question for you, Bruce, and a little bit of a follow-up, but on a different trend as well. We realize that there are some officials out there that tend to take disciplinary decisions a little personally. They make the call. They don't feel that the player got what ultimately they deserve from the disciplinary panel. And there's not a lot of them, but there are a few. I guess, what's your advice, or what's what can you do to assure them from the disciplinary standpoint that all the information that's gathered is important and provides for a legitimate discussions with the committee, and ultimately that the committee is doing what they feel is in the best interest?
Well, you're right. It does happen occasionally, not a lot, less and less as we go on. But if that does happen, and one of the officials contacts me, and they seem to be a little upset at what the decision was, I'll contact them. We'll talk about it. I shouldn't say quite often, but occasionally the official might point something out that wasn't in the report, or that if we had him at the hearing, he didn't expound on, and if he would have said those things, it might have made a difference in there. But I try to relax him and try to encourage him to keep doing their job. It wasn't you, it was just the decision that what everybody saw, why they came up with that decision.
Great point. Jim, same question to you. What do you say to that official that maybe takes it a little bit personally and feels like it's a question or personal attack on their judgment?
Well, and unfortunately, I have seen this happen once or twice in my career. And it's a very difficult thing, because obviously there's something very emotional about what's happened, very personal to the official. But what we really try to do is to get them away from, like after a game or something, when things happen, or right after the decision, but to get them away, get them calmed down, and just try to explain to them, it's like you have to think of it sort of as our legal system. Your job is a cop. You see what happens, you write what happens. The actual determination of what the penalty is going to be goes to a judge. And a judge makes his determination based upon the information that's provided to him. Now, there may be other things that come into that determination, but it's not you as the official. You aren't the one that got the guy off or something you didn't do. This is how the process works. And a lot of them, they eventually do understand it. But occasionally you get some that are just really wrapped up into something that occurred. Usually it's an abuse of an official when something has been done to that official. And, again, you have to be able to separate yourself from, being the person involved as opposed to being the cop writing the ticket for what happened.
Look, I think that's an excellent point. And the one thing I want to add there is I believe it works both ways too. And I know that we have officials that seem to get offended or take it personally when the player or the coach does do something that requires them to assess that penalty. And it's like, well, why are you doing this? Why are you swinging the stick at the head of the opponent in my game, type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think we tend to, I think human nature suggests that, well, what did I do wrong to create that environment where that player felt it was okay? And the answer to that is 99.99% of the time, you did absolutely nothing wrong. And just as you want to hold that player accountable or that coach accountable, the bottom line and the reality is they are the ones that are ultimately responsible for their actions. So whether it's a situation where they committed infraction and you have to assess that penalty, that's not your fault. You're just doing your job. Okay. And we can't take that or feel like, well, it's because I did something wrong, because that's not going to be the case. And the same thing happens on the disciplinary side. They work hard to do what they feel is in the best interest of everyone that's involved. And that's an important part of what this process is.
Yeah. And I would also say that it is one of the most difficult things that we deal with as an official on the ice, but it's also one of the most rewarding things, is to be able to go out there and to call your game and to remain not emotionally attached to it. It's very difficult, but very rewarding.
Fantastic. Bruce, a quick question from the audience here. And this is right down your wheelhouse. Do you have, or should there be a person, and I'm assuming that you probably do this, that reviews the reports for the proper application of the noted rule reference? And what occurs when there is an issue that the proper application of the rule doesn't happen, they got the wrong player, or it's it doesn't fit the narrative in terms of what rule is applied?
That does happen. It's rare, but it does happen, and especially with video today that we use all the time, you can see that a whole lot different when you're slowing it down, when you're playing it 25 times. This is before we even get to the hearing, of course. And if we see something that just doesn't jive with the report that was sent in, I'll contact the official. Again, it's really easy nowadays because their email address is right there. And contact them, have a conversation with them, sometimes by phone, but quite often email back and forth. And I'll share the video with them as well. And sometimes they will come back and say, yeah, you know what? I didn't see it that way. And we all have to remember that a referee is seeing this in real time. He has a split second to make a decision, and he's going to make a mistake from time to time. Not very often, but it does happen on a rare occasion. And I think if you just work with the official and you let them know what you saw and what the video shows, I think they're more in tune to seeing that change. And then we'll make the change. And if it's the wrong player, we'll notify the player that was incorrectly assessed that penalty that it's not you, and then we'll contact the player that it was. And again, we go with the coaching too, because quite often the coaches will come to us and say it wasn't him, it was this other guy. because he doesn't want his best player out of the game. He'd rather sacrifice somebody that only plays a shift or two a period. So we're all working together on this. It's a team effort with the officials, with the coaching staff, and with the disciplinary committee.
And Bruce, you are too kind in Arizona, because usually if there's a major mess up in the game report, I'm getting a call from the discipline guy saying, hey, what's going on here? This is, and explaining why. And so, asking us to contact the official to try to figure out what happened. And, one thing that I didn't add earlier, but one of the most important things that we try to make sure our officials are aware of is that please only hit the submit button once. I actually had a situation where I had a player receive 5 penalties. It was the same penalty 5 times because they just kept hitting the submit button. And that is a total disaster for the discipline people and for the player as well.
Yep, for sure. For sure. Okay, we got time for one more question for each of you. Hopefully, finish on, I'm not exactly sure what kind of a note, but I just want to throw this out there. Bruce, what's the worst disciplinary situation or hearing that you've ever had? Has there ever been that case where that player or that coach comes in, it's obvious that they did something that was so egregious, and yet they just can't accept the fact that it was them?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I don't know if it was the worst one I've ever had, but it certainly is at the top of the list. And it was recently, as a matter of fact, it was a youth player, and we were doing it by Zoom as we do everything nowadays. And he was on the call, and his mother was on the call with him, and they were emphatic that the penalty that was called did not happen. It actually did not happen. He did it. It was something else that happened. And he's the entire game, even leading up to that, the other team was making fun of him and calling him names and so on and so forth. So of course that was supposed to be the reason why he got out of control a bit. But the penalty, that the suspension we ended up giving him, and the reason for it, they were not accepting, not one bit. They really challenged it quite a bit, but they never appealed it, which they all, as we know, have that ability to do. So it must have been something that stuck with them, that they felt it warranted that type of a suspension. It was pretty severe because it was a check to the head and laid the kid out on the ice for a period of time. The kid did not come back to play in the rest of that game. He seemed to be okay, but nevertheless, the severity of the penalty warranted the suspension, but the parents were not going to buy it one bit, neither was the son, but it ended up happening nevertheless.
Yep. Jim, how about you? What's your worst on-ice incident you've ever witnessed?
I've witnessed a couple of crazy ones, but just to show you that it's not always the 18U player that can do crazy things. Once, many years ago, out in California, as a matter of fact, in a squirt game, game is over. We're going to the handshake line. Every players are on the ice going through the line, and a squirt player decides that he's going to start a melee, and he literally punches a kid, and then he takes off, and he skates all around the ice, and every time he comes by an opposing player, he punches him. And you have coaches, you have the officials trying to catch this kid on the ice, and parents jumped on the ice. There was no glass in the rink at this time, and it just was all because one kid decided he was just unhappy. We're not even sure what his team won. So anyway, he did go to a hearing, and he got suspended for a year from playing. But it's pretty hard to imagine at 10 years old that something like that would go through your mind.
For sure. For sure. Okay, well, we got to start wrapping up here. I got some obligatory things that that BJ tells me that I have to do at the end of each Zoom cast. So let me share my screen real quick. Just want to point out the upcoming schedule. Tonight, Tuesday, December 1st, we just did the USA Hockey Discipline. Next week, episode number 25. is going to deal with the American development model. So we're going to have the player development people involved, and where officiating fits in, and how we're trying to work together at all levels, because the ADM is not just 8 and under, it's all levels of hockey, and where we can fit in to partner to make the game a little bit better. Episode 26, start using your social media platform, and let's see if we can't fill this one up. It's going to be a live You Make the Call. So I think DJ and company have some live or some actual videos to show and to go through and make a You Make the Call right on the spot, interactive type thing. So that leads us into the holiday break, and it should be a way to finish off the calendar year, so to speak, before we take a couple of weeks off for Christmas and New Year's. Social media, don't forget to follow us on usahockey.com. You can go back and watch any of the previous 23 Zoomcasts on youtube.com/USA Hockey. You can also follow Officiating at USA Hockey Officiating on Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that. So please be sure to follow through with any social media to share the information and contribute to what we're doing here. A reminder, BJ will send out a follow-up survey shortly. Please take the time to complete that. It takes a few minutes, but it gives us feedback in terms of how we're doing with these Zoomcasts, and that information is very important to us. I want to thank all the participants for joining us tonight. For those loyal viewers that have been here for all 23 now, thank you very much for that continued support. We look forward to seeing you next week. And most importantly, I'd like to thank both Jim and Bruce for taking time away from their busy schedules and joining us tonight. Very insightful information. Hopefully, we've been able to provide a little bit of insight in terms of what the process is for USA Hockey and the disciplinary side of things. And we appreciate also all you do throughout the course of the season. Jim obviously worked closely with you on the referee section, but Bruce has been a significant partner, not only in the game reporting system, but in hockey in general, and certainly with involvement of the Playing Rules Committee for the last several cycles here, and a valuable friend and someone that we can count on in the USA hockey world. So thank you, gentlemen, both, for joining us. Thank you for everyone for joining us tonight, and be safe. Enjoy the rest of your evening. We appreciate your continued dedication to USA Hockey, and we look forward to seeing you somewhere down the road. Be safe and good night.
Thank you all.
Night.